Hello and welcome. He began singing to attract the girls, but went on to use his voice to help Africa's starving millions. 2 decades on, this Irish musician hasn't stopped putting his money where his often explicit mouth is. This week on One on One, meet rock rebel and activist Bob Geldof. He was riding Britain's punk wave when he formed the chart-topping Boomtown Rats, a move that put him in the company of the rock star A-list throughout the 1970s and 80s. What set Bob Geldof apart was his reaction to a news story on Ethiopia's famine in 1984, prompting the singer to rally his musician friends to form Band Aid and create the legendary global Live Aid concert, which raised over $100 million for those starving in Africa. Following years of campaigning for African debt relief with his friend Bono of U2, Geldof revisited the fundraising concept with Live 8 on the 20th anniversary of Live Aid. For his relentless activism, the Irish singer has received an honorary knighthood from Britain's Queen Elizabeth II. But his rebellious nature shows no signs of abating. Bob, I was going to start off by asking if you're content with where you are in life. And then I read that you said that it's part of human nature not to be content. So I guess I should ask, are you content with not being content?
It's a state of being, so I guess. I don't know anything else. I think this pursuit of, the better life through yoga or contemplation and thing is almost neurotic. I mean, why would you go off and, stand one-legged on top of a pole naked in India or hide in a cave or go out into the desert for 40 days and nights to achieve contentment? That's mad. That's not normal. And so those things seem to me to be proof not of achieving contentment, but of how possible it is if you're human.
So you're obviously not going into the desert and standing on poles and things right now. So what are you focusing your time on?
I just keep busy all the time, hence, the way I look. So it's stuff that interests me is what, I need to be mentally active. I need to be intellectually active. And when I'm not, I get bored very quickly. And that is a key to a melancholy. I wouldn't call it a depression, but it's a melancholy where I feel pointless and useless.
So how do you balance that, the business life, political life, family life? What rules do you set yourself? Is there anything you say, I'm going to devote a certain amount of time to something, or do you just go with the flow?
I go with the flow in general, but the point is I do feel awful when it impinges on the family thing, which is, terrible cliche. I doubt there's a single person you've ever talked to who hasn't said that's the most important. The thing I think I'm best at, and I do understand this might be a club of one, the thing I think I'm best at, the thing I, without a single shadow of a doubt, enjoy totally, is playing music live. And so I'm always trying to get to that point. I like doing, I don't mind the recording bit or the writing bit, but that's only to get me to, playing live and having, for me, fun. And that's where, I'm not sure I feel content, but I feel centered. I feel absolutely not nervous. It's physically exhausting, which is not normally the case, in my life. It's emotionally, I suppose, fulfilling, psychologically cathartic, financially rewarding. You leave stage after a good gig, I was going to say content there, watch it, but rewarded. I sleep the sleep of the just, which I don't normally do.
That's the thing you really enjoy. So that's the thing you worry might knock the balance out of your life, you say, with the family and everything else. But you've described yourself as a nightmare to live with.
Yeah, I think I'm difficult. Well, I think I've just pretty much described what it must, what it's like. I mean, I'm very serious when I say, the family thing. I mean, I'm not saying to be glib or to get people to like me. I could care less. you know, you go home and it feels great, and when it doesn't feel great, it's awful. You know, awful. Life is just crap. Life without love is meaningless. In fact, it's almost ridiculous. So that's key. It sort of works like this, so we can get to the nub of this quickly. I do politics for my brain. I do business for my pocket. I do music for my soul. And I do the family for my heart. There you go.
What about the way your character's changed over the years? How much have you mellowed from that angry young man who hit the pop scene in the early 70s?
Well, you must remember I was a child at the absolute cusp age of our culture. I hit teenagehood when the Beatles took off. I was 11, I think, when they started, and I saw in 1964 the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan in a cinema in Dublin. School was not very interesting to me. I didn't like sports, and any guys, whatever, didn't play. My father was a traveller, commercial traveller. He sold towels, so he was around the country. My mother had died when I was 6 or 7.
It was unexpected as well. It was very traumatic the way you were told as well, wasn't it?
Well, she just woke up one night and said, "Bob, I have a headache." My dad's name was Bob too. And bang, she was dead. Like, she was 40.
You were 7?
I was 6 or 7, yeah, something like that. And I mean, yes, it's you know, it's traumatic. Of course it is. I mean, that's it. That's the moment that all points of your life refer back to if you're a child. But the child at that point is not really aware of how huge an event in that person's life it is, in the child's life it is. It's later, it whacks you, you know, when you're about 11, 12 going on. But then I just had to, was dismayed by my father crying. And then I was packed off to friends, because in those days children didn't go to, you know, the funerals and that. And that was it. My dad was really poor and had to go around selling his towels. My sisters were older. They didn't want to be mums overnight. I was kind of left to my own devices. School suffered as a result. I didn't do homework. I listened to Radio Luxembourg, rock and roll music, and I read.
You seem to be very distant from your father as a kid, but seemed to get closer later in life. Was it just a generational gap thing?
No. Well, that's a good point. I mean, there was a total rupture in our part of the world between the 60s and what went before. A complete and utter change. A whole new language was invented, which was essentially rock and roll, which articulated that change. And at the time I came of age, it embraced everything. Rock and roll was political. So that was largely it. My dad came from a time when when work was the preeminent, because of poverty, work was the preeminent thing. It was for me too, but, you know, I was not going to go down the university route. I just didn't want to, you know. Academia did not beckon or loom large in my life, besides which I couldn't go. I failed every single exam I ever got, every single exam. You know, I don't say it with pride, I just couldn't be arsed.
Now, if your childhood was tough, you obviously had, I guess, an even tougher decade. In the past decade, you went through all kinds of tragedy and terrible things. Yeah, in the past decade with, you know, the split with your wife, and then later her death, and the battles for custody with the children and so on.
There weren't battles for custody. That's a misreading, but go on.
Well, I'll ask you more about that in a sec, but let me ask you, have you finally got to the end of what you described as the long, dark years of the soul?
Yes, I have. Thank God.
Touch wood. So you were saying it wasn't a battle for custody? It seemed to be maybe something the media picked up on.
Oh, of course they picked up on it. You know, it was... Paul and I were famous kids, I mean, from a very young age, you know. I met her before our first record was ever released even, you know. And, you know, there was famous rock and roll couples, you know, Mick and Bianca, Mick and Jerry, Rod and Britt, and suddenly there was this new aggressive music which was demanding change everywhere. Paula was this very smart, very beautiful girl who had a completely different attitude and, you know, could write like an angel and was on TV. And so here was this, you know, loudmouth young pop singer from Ireland, you know, which was driving everyone nuts, you know, wouldn't shut up then as now. And so, you know, it became this alternative, you know, Rod and Brit, Mick and Bianca. And in a bizarre way, when it was Charles and Diana, here was this kind of other, you know, weird, very homely people, me and Paula and our kids, you know, and it was very homely. And then it all went wrong.
Well, did that whole thing that happened, all the trouble that happened, and did it change your view on the media, the way the media handled?
No, not at all. It didn't change my view in the media. No, because you know, don't forget, Paul and I have been together 20 years. So, you know, endless press stuff, you know, whether positive or negative. No, it didn't.
But the tabloids, British tabloids, are harder than most.
The British tabloids are scum. Let's not beat about the bush. But I totally believe in their right to be as scummy as they like. You know, they must be. I can't think of any other intellectual concept. The press must be free, you know, utterly free.
Bob, don't go away. We're going to touch on your interest now in the activities you're doing, especially with the Band-Aid and follow-up. We're talking with Sir Bob Geldof. This is One on One. We're back in just a moment.